Hello, hello. Welcome to this episode of the Children's Book Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Micaela, and I am delighted that you could join me today. Today's episode is an interview conversation between myself and Miss Linda Peavy. She has extensive experience not only in publishing, but also in grant writing. And her company is one that helps secure grants and teach grant writing to small business owners. It is not only if you're a nonprofit should you be thinking about grants. You should also think about grants if you are a for-profit company. And if you are a children's book author who's looking for ways to extend your impact through additional books in a series or through additional reach with your marketing, then you absolutely need to tune into this episode. Not only will she teach you where to get the money, she will also tell you what you need to do in order to prepare for submitting your grant applications. And I assure you, the list of resources that she provides is amazing, and you will want to write it down, and you can go and get her contact details from the show notes. But make sure you tune in and take notes. Check it out and let me know in the comments any feedback or any suggestions that you have, or how this moves you to take action, hopefully immediately. Now, here's the episode. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Children's Book Marketing Podcast. We've talked a few times already, but I'm more excited to share what you have as your area of expertise, because I know too many children's book authors who need to know more about grant writing. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
It is a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here and share whatever knowledge I have so that, we can try to help children's books authors to be well funded.
We definitely need that. And you're kind of a twofer, because not only do you have experience with grant writing, but you also have experience in publishing. And that uniquely qualifies you to speak about the needs that we have as children's book authors. And they're very specific from authors that write for other genres. So what you have to say is not only golden for the purpose of helping children's book authors get funded, but I think it can also help people dial into their message and their intention, because there are parameters around some of the grants that they may be interested in.
Right.
And there may be questions that children's book authors have about how they fit with some of their initial interactions and with some of their existing platforms of purpose and intention to share more. But this can really help provide additional structure to it too. So
I think so.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your role in publishing that may have at some point in time led you to where you are now.
Sure. Wow. Well, I started in professional publishing many, many moons ago as a director of marketing at that point, it was actually the oldest publishing house in the United States, Pilgrim Press, which is in Cleveland. I served as director of marketing, and from there I was recruited over to Judson Press, where I served as their associate publisher and their director of marketing. And that's a publishing house that's a little over 200 years old. And I served over 10 years there. So my background is in professional publishing. My responsibilities were to really look at shaping the publishing house and acquiring some titles, overseeing editorial, overseeing marketing. And we did publish, quite a few children's books in addition to the other books that we were publishing as well for church ministry, for the lay audience. But we published a series of children's books and additional books as well. And so from there, I retired and decided to start my company, POV Consulting, which is 15 years old this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so part of the services that I provide is through grant writing. And almost all of those 15 years, I've been writing grants. I've been able to secure a little bit over $17 million in grant funding for my clients. So I've written so many different kinds of grants in so many different areas. So the field is really, wide open when it comes to grant funding. People always have the question, is there a grant for, fill in the blank, whatever I do. And I always tell them that, if it's legal, right? More than likely, there's a grant available for you. It's a matter of finding the funder, right? And the foundation that wants to be able to support you. So that's really a lot about doing the grant research and really, again, knowing exactly, what product that you're presenting that people can fund. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But here I am 15 years later being a grant writer, but also helping organizations with grant research and being able to find what I call their perfect funder. Because again, the field is wide open for grants. It's just a matter of finding that organization that believes in the same mission that you do.
Hmm. Now, when you say your perfect funder, who are you referring to?
I'm referring to a foundation, right? It could be a corporation with a foundation arm. It could be a private funder. It could be an investor, but specifically an organization that has a similar mission as yours. So let's say you're focused on children's books that have a particular angle about self esteem, for example. So you would want to work with and find a foundation and a funder who also has that mission of wanting to instill self-esteem in children. You're providing it through a resource, right? So it's important to be able to match your mission and your area of interest with the mission and the area of interest to that particular foundation so that you're both on the same page and that you're providing a resource that they want to fund. And so I consider that to be the perfect funder when, all of the stars align and you have a mission and they have a mission. They're out to fund organizations that meet their mission and address their mission. You're providing a resource that does that. And so, through meeting with the funder and having those conversations, you realize that there's a match and that would be a funder who is willing to provide you with free grant funding so that you can continue on your writing mission.
Yeah. Our audience should be familiar with that conceptually because we talk a lot about the ideal reader with the context of bulk purchasing. That's typically around your ideal funder in your world. But in our world, that looks like an organization, corporation, an institution, or a nonprofit that may be in alignment with the mission, the themes, the concepts that are introduced through the characters in the books. And so, if anybody who's listening to the Children's Book Marketing Podcast sees the similarity, know that there's not only alignment for people who will purchase your books in bulk because there is a similar initiative that you have and your children's books may support, but the same goes for funding opportunities for
Absolutely.
grants as well. I love how that aligns, that consistency. So thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. It becomes important. And I think one other aspect that is so overlooked when you are going on this journey to get funding is the absolute need to meet with that funder because you are creating a relationship. You're asking for free money, they're providing free money. And I think there's such a misnomer that you fill out an application, you send it off, and then you expect to get grant funding. And I've been doing this for a long time, so I can assure you that it is as important to meet with that funder and start developing that relationship as it is what you put in the grant application. And that's one area that is often overlooked because people get fearful and they don't think you can meet with the funder. But that is one of the most critical ways that you can increase your chances of getting funding significantly is by meeting with that funder and beginning to establish that relationship.
Now let's talk about that a little bit because you mentioned there are some misnomers around what people perceive. Can you share maybe two or three of the misperceptions that exist around grant writing, not specifically just to children's book authors, but in general, where we're thinking about what people believe to be true versus what's reality?
Oh, absolutely. There are several, actually. One would be grants are not paid back. I find it interesting that they still don't know that. They think that somewhere along the way, I mean, they're getting this free money that they have to pay it back, but they don't. I think another huge misconception is that grants are just for nonprofits. It used to be that way, right? When you thought about a grant, you thought about a nonprofit, but COVID-19 changed everything because there were so many small businesses going out of business and having to shut their doors that foundations and then corporations with foundations decided that they needed to intervene and do something about it because at the end of the day, the small business is the backbone of the US economy. And so, because of COVID 19, you had once again foundations and then corporations with foundational arms starting to create pools of grant funding just for profit organizations. So now there are millions of dollars available in grant funding for profit organizations, which at one time was just completely unheard of. So I think that's really the biggest change in the grant world is that, yes, now you have grants for profit organizations.
Hmm. The reason I think that's so important to note in our space is because there's this huge ambition sometimes at the earliest onset of the author journey, where the belief may be that it's necessary to become a nonprofit in order to promote the initiatives that a children's book author has in mind. So, for instance, there are lots of us who might have a desire to have a nonprofit organization and think that the only way they're going to reach the masses of people that they really want to impact is to do it as a nonprofit. But the reality is, in our world, you don't have to be a nonprofit. Maybe once upon a time you did, but today you don't because the funding is available, whether you're a nonprofit or for profit. So that's probably going to set somebody free right there from creating an entirely separate business as a nonprofit, in addition to what they have as a children's book author.
A huge shift, right? It's a huge shift that has happened. Probably the largest one, in the 15 years that I've been writing grants, because as you mentioned, there was just the reality that if you wanted grant funding, you had to be a nonprofit. But everything is different now. There are literally hundreds of thousands of for-profit organizations receiving grant money on a regular basis. It's a beautiful thing for sure because it widens the pool of those who need the funding. Now they have the opportunity to secure it.
I mentioned you earlier this week to a friend of mine, and that we're both from the Northeast Ohio area. The
Okay.
Cleveland area is not that large.
No.
And I went to lunch with a friend at Geraci's downtown Cleveland, some of the best pizza in town for anyone who is ever wondering where to get it. And she has a background in nonprofit management, nonprofit funding. And this is not only a misnomer for our genre as authors, but because she's got extensive experience with funding large scale projects on the nonprofit side, even she wasn't aware that she could get funding for her for profit initiatives.
Wow.
So that's a message that I think we can all hold on to, but it applies to so many people that the belief shift is upon us. And because you said there's a lot of funds available, needs to be more well known. Thanks for
Absolutely.
putting that out there.
Absolutely. I try as much as I can to provide that information on as large of a platform as I can because it's changing people's lives for sure.
So, because there's a lot of money available through different organizations
Mhm.
funded by the government, funded by philanthropists, can you share how children's book authors may be uniquely positioned to submit grant applications?
Well, I think when I think about the work of a children's book author, one, their books, and books will forever be needed, right, across the country, despite some of the things that we might be saying. Books are still very much needed. And there is a significant amount of grant money for education, especially children's education. And when you look at the area of children's book publishing, that's the same area. You're speaking to the needs of children across different topics, across different areas of interest. I think that's one of the things that uniquely positions a children's book author to get grant funding because they are serving the educational market. It's really about being able to do the research and find that perfect funder that wants to be able to provide you with resources, but because they're writing in this area where
Mhm.
there's already so much money allotted to, the pool of money is there for them to be able to apply for grant funding to get. I think that's probably one of the most significant reasons why they're uniquely positioned is that they happen to be writing in an area where there's already so much money allocated.
So, where should that research begin?
There's a number of different places, right? There's about five or six typical grant research websites that anyone should go to, including children's book authors. I'll talk about those, and then I'll talk about some very specific ones in the area of writers. So let's start with the Foundation Directory Online. That is the largest portal of grant providers, grant organizations, foundations, corporations that provide grants in the country, right? Foundation Directory Online. And so it is subscription based. It's about $50 a month, but the great news is that if you have a local library, they give you access for free, right? So you can do this grant research for free. So they're the largest. They provide the names of the organizations. However, you can go to other portals that will provide you specific information on the grant, not just the organization that provides the grant, but the grant itself, a synopsis of the grant, contact information, links to the grant. There's two in particular I want to mention. One is called Grant Watch, so grantwatch.com, and it's about maybe $20 a week. And the other is grantstation.com, and it's about $200 a year. And they both provide such great information on resources for grants, not just here in the US. And that's something I really want to stress is that these grant search portals, these websites, they provide information on grants all over the world. So these are global searches. So if you
Mm.
have children's book authors that don't live in the US, that's fine. They can live in another country, they can live on another continent, and still be able to search for grants that are geared for their particular area. So, those are the three main ones that I would recommend: the Foundation Directory Online, again, free in the libraries, grantwatch.com, and then grantstation.com. The other avenue is to search specifically for grants that are created and allotted for writers. There's just a couple of ones I want to mention specifically. Now, some of these will probably come up as you're doing your overall grant search, but I do want to mention these because I know they're available now. The Carnegie Fund, the Elizabeth George Foundation, and then there's actually money available for women writers. One is called Money for Women, and that's the Barbara Deming Memorial Fund grant. So honing on your search for grants using the typical search engine, but
Mhm.
also looking specifically for grants that are geared solely towards writers. And then I'm a big advocate of joining these organizations. I want to mention a couple of these because this becomes really important not only to be able to apply for grant funding, but to just network and be a part of organizations that provide grants specifically. And all of these do. The Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, they offer grants. The Children's Literature Association, they offer grants. The American Society of Journalists and Authors, they offer grants. I'm just an advocate of being able to join as many organizations as possible, especially those that provide grants that will place you in a better position to get information as soon as it releases. That's typically what happens when you are a member of some of these other organizations. I also recommend being able to join different writers conferences that happen all across the country. I'm right outside of Cleveland, and we have a Great Lakes African American Writers Conference that happens every single year. It's an opportunity to showcase your work, to meet some of the most well known authors across the country, A lot of these conferences also offer grant funding. Being involved in different writing events are important. I'm also a big advocate of connecting with libraries. I think there's such an underutilized service in the community. Libraries are so key. And there are major libraries that also provide grant funding, like Boston is one. The Boston Public Library, they literally have a children's writers residency program where they also provide grant funding. Seeking different kinds of fellowships, I think, are also important. And then I want to mention this one site that specifically lists grants for writers, and that's authority.pub. Authority.pub currently lists a number of grants for writers. There's a number of different avenues as a writer that you can pursue for grants. One of the biggest pieces of information available is that there are specific grants for not just writers, for children's writers, for writers of children's books. Hopefully, that will be an eye opener for a lot of your listeners to know that there's money available specifically for them.
Yes, yes. Though I almost feel like I need to take a sip of water for you because you just shared a plethora of places by which to align. I'm only going to say that you've done two things. You've not only unleashed in somebody's mind right now, I know somebody's mind is just doing the explosion emoji, but you've released somebody from the belief that they can't even pursue their interests in writing
That's right.
because of the costs involved with publishing, particularly in our space, illustrating, but also with marketing. Funding is there. The other thing that you just did is create more of a business structure for a children's book author, because up to this point, we've talked a ton about the marketing because this is the Children's Book Marketing Podcast, but we also talk about publishing expenses. And this opens up an avenue to carve space for what will now have to exist in someone's mind as the financing
Mhm.
portion of their business as a children's book author. That might have, for somebody, meant allocating funds from their household budget to cover the cost of running their children's book business. That might have meant for somebody having a side hustle that helped to fuel what's necessary for their marketing expenditures or for the next production run. But what you just did, Miss Linda, was help somebody figure out that the funds do not have to come from stretched resources. This is like poetry. I should snap for this. But I really want to thank you for unlocking that because you gave somebody hope who's been thinking about how to make it work. And that's huge. Just starting is huge. So thank you for
Right. And
sharing.
I say this to a lot of people that want to pursue business because I give so many webinars on grant writing. You have to make a decision at some point as to whether or not your writing of children's books are going to be a hobby or business. And those are two very, very, very different things. So either you treat it as a hobby or you treat it as a business. If you're going to treat it as a business, you need to be aware of creating a budget, knowing what your expenses are, knowing how you're going to pay for illustrations, for editing, for the publication, for the marketing of it, because the marketing, as you know, is so key. We don't wait until the book is released, right? There's pre-marketing, right? And then there's the book launch, and then there's post-marketing. So these are all expenses. These are all real expenses.
Yeah,
But I tell everyone, you have to have an idea. You have to create an operating budget because you have to know how much money to ask for. If you are going to pursue grants, you have to know, what is this going to cost me really to be able to pursue my love of writing? And if it's going to be a business, you want to be able to know, okay, what is this going to cost me so that I know what to ask for when it comes to the grant funding.
absolutely. Now, because you mentioned this, I want to make it available to anybody who's listened to this episode the budget that I provide to children's book authors. It's a free download that you can just grab. But what it covers is the marketing side of the budget, because that would be more applicable to someone who's already released the book, who's
Right,
already in the stages of
right.
communicating with people. But there's a separate budget aside from that. The production budget. The production budget includes everything from conceptualization of the manuscript through editing, through proofreading. We
Different
cannot
things,
skip that.
different things. Copy editing is not proofreading, absolutely.
That is so overlooked. But then all of what's required then for going from that to getting the book printed is a separate budget from marketing. And I think people don't realize that they are not the same thing and that your operating budget is the overall, but you've
Right.
got two different expense categories by which a budget has to exist. So I will make that available in addition to what you're sharing with some of these resources. Those will be in the show notes, and that will also be something that people can directly click and link to so that there is no excuse why
Oh, wonderful.
we
That
cannot get
sounds
this.
like that's a wonderful resource.
Yes, yes. Miss Linda, when we're thinking about all of these potential organizations to align with and submitting grants through some of the sources that you
Mhm.
share, are there any things that a children's book author needs to have in place in order to be given more favorable consideration?
I always talk about the preparation phase because often too many organizations, they see a grant, they download it, they complete it, they fill it out, and then they wonder why they get a rejection letter. You actually have to prepare. You really need to prepare if you're going to be writing grants. Preparation requires having your documentation in order. Do you have an employer identification number, an EIN? Are you using your social security number or your TIN? You have to make a decision. If you are a nonprofit, you absolutely need a 501c3. That is a requirement for you to get grant funding. The 501c3 is your tax exempt designation by the IRS. And the good news is that it used to take the IRS, what, maybe 3 to 6 months to process those applications, is now taking them maybe 6 to 8 weeks. If you're going the for profit route, you need to find out whether or not you're required to have a business license. And that depends on your state. It's different for every state. I'm in Ohio as a for profit, I need a business license. And some states you don't. So I always ask people to go to their Secretary of State's website and find out whether or not that business license is required. If you have any letters of support, right, from organizations that maybe have funded you before or believe in your mission, those are always important to be able to include in a grant application. You need to decide how you're going to apply for grants. So, if you are a children's book author, do you have a number of books or do you just have one book? Let's say you have a plethora of books. You are a prolific author and you have a lot of different books. Well, you need to categorize them based on your target population because that is one of the ways in which you search for grants based on your target population. Do you have a group of books that maybe are for preschoolers or another group of books that maybe they're for tweens or that younger age, 7 to 9, because that makes a difference. And also, what is the message in the book? Because that will also help you to align to your perfect funder. So let's say you create a book that deals with issues of self esteem. You're going to look for a funder that is providing funds in that particular area. Or maybe your book deals with ethnicity. Maybe it deals with hair texture. You may want to look for funders or foundations that are giving money towards those from underrepresented communities. It's important to take an assessment of your resources first and find out how you're going to go about searching for grants, especially for authors who have more than one book or maybe several categories of books, because it does make a difference how you go about doing the research. Now, there are some grants that you're a children's book author, that's enough, right? But if you want to really be able to pursue the largest pool of funding, then also look at how you have categorized your particular books and who the target is.
Yeah, that's so important because what it does is extract from the content plan. that a children's book author may create. If you have not created a content plan, definitely holler at me so that I can help you figure out what you should be saying. But when you're asked the question, what should you request in a grant? If you have a content plan, you already have things that you're telling to your community from a point of relativity. So that's some place that could be a starting point for figuring out where to go for grants based on
Absolutely.
what you're already talking about. Another thing could be looking at some of the people that it impacts. In my case, my children's book is a story about a father and son who spend time together. And my overarching theme is family time. So, for organizations that are interested in supporting father and son
Exactly.
relationships,
Exactly.
that's an easy target for
Right.
me because I look for grants that specifically say fatherhood initiatives.
That's right.
For somebody who's looking at where to go to get more insight into what their requests should even be, you're a complete resource. But I don't know that we've shared enough about how you can help someone who's trying to figure out what to do next. So, can you share, Miss Linda, how you can work with children's book authors who are at that place where they want to understand what next steps to take to secure grants?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I provide free grant writing webinars multiple times every single month. I would strongly suggest that your listeners and your viewers register for one of them. There's many days to choose from every single month. They're completely free. They give you a really great understanding of the grant world and what you need. What are the requirements? How do you need to prepare? I even give you some of the search engines that I recommend that you use. I typically give actual grant applications and resources that are available that you can apply for immediately. I want to recommend that people sign up first for that free grant writing webinar because it is a great source of information. On a case by case, we provide grant writing. We do grant research, customized grant research, so that we take your particular industry and we create a customized list of available grant funding for you that saves you a lot of time. And I also have a few other ancillary resources that I think are very helpful for those who are just starting. I literally make sure that they're priced right so that they can be affordable to everybody. Literally, my lowest priced item is like $5. That's I call it my $1 million grant roadmap. And it literally lays out the steps that I took to be able to secure $17 million. It's literally a $5 resource, but it's worth its weight in gold. Then I have another success kit that really helps people to find who that perfect funder is. Last but certainly not least, I have a full in-depth grant writing course. It is everything from soup to nuts. It guides you through the entire process of how do you do the best research, how do you write the best grant, how do you place yourself in a position to get grant funding, not just write the applications, but you place yourself in a better position to actually win the grant funding. And we have so many testimonials of people who have taken the course and they've gotten $10,000, $30,000, even more than that. And so I do have that full grant writing course. You can always go to my website at lipav.com, lipav.com. And on that website, you will see a section of my grant resources, the course, the $1 million grant roadmap, the other success kit. But there's also a section where it states upcoming webinars so that you can sign up to my webinars, which are typically in two different areas. There's a webinar for women owned or women led organizations, and another group of webinars for Black owned or Black led organizations. That one website, lapav.com, will give you the information you need to know about the resources, but also how to contact me if you need additional resources like the grant writing or the grant research.
Amazing, amazing. That barrage of resources is something that will be available in the show notes. So if you didn't catch all of it, know that you need to go back, rewind the episode, write that down because you need to have access to these resources to get the funding that you're looking for. I
Yes.
always talk about there's 5 different ways that you can fund your children's book business. And this is one of 5 ways, but this is one way that I wholeheartedly believe it needs to be a part of the priority of the
Yeah.
strategy to
Yes.
how to get funding. This can make it possible to create a series when previously you may have thought that you could only write one book. This makes it
Right.
possible for you to print your books overseas if you're curious on where you're going to get the money to afford that. You now know where you can get that. If you're thinking about how in the world you're going to be able to afford ads to reach all of these readers whose lives you want to change, here's where the money may be provided through grants. Please use what Miss Linda Peavy has shared as your next steps for how to get the funding you need to be the type of children's book author with the impact that you're hoping to have among your readers, not just for them to read the book, but to extend their experiences beyond the book. So I want to thank you, Miss Linda, for
Absolutely.
joining
This has
us.
been great.
I'm so glad we got a chance to do this. Now, if you're part of the Facebook community, Children's Book Marketing
Yes.
Made Easy, you will see Miss Linda a time or two beyond now. And especially if you're in the Children's Book Marketing Academy, you will see her there as well. But we have some things to share more about. So stay tuned, check the show notes, go download these links, and make sure you get this information today.
Yes.
We'll see you next time, next episode. Thank you for joining once again. And Miss Linda, could not thank you enough for being a part of this
Thank
magnificent episode. Thank you.
you.